I'm Kashan and you are watching The Book Archer. So today we are going to be getting into my May and my June wrap up. Y'all, I cannot wait to talk to y'all about these books. I'm going to be giving y'all my stats. Then I'm going to talk about the books from lowest rated to highest rated for May, and then talk about them for lowest rated to highest rated for June. Some of these books I did mention in my mid-year book freakout tag, so I have left timestamps below. If there are any books that you want to skip and you're not interested in watching, it'll be in the description box and you can just click on the timestamp to go to the next book. Let's go ahead and get started. In the month of May, I read a total of 8 books and I had 2 DNFs. The 2 DNFs are not included in the 8 books that I actually read. The format of the books that I read in the month of May were 4 audiobooks, 3 physical books, and 1 e-arc or NetGalley that I read. As far as genre goes, I read 3 contemporary, 3 fantasy, 1 historical fiction, and 1 romance. And my average star rating for the month of May was a 3.6. So I had some really good books and some duds. Let me start out by telling y'all the 2 books that I DNF'd in the month of May. The first one you all saw in an unhaul video I posted a while ago. One of the books that I unhauled was Wilder Girls by Rory Power. This book was such a waste of my time. Nothing happened for the first 100 pages of this book. This book is only 300 pages. The premise of the book is that there are these girls who attended a boarding school. I think it's like Braxter's boarding school when a pandemic broke out, and they became quarantined on this island, and they still get military supplies and stuff dropped off, but the military has basically said, we will continue to communicate with y'all, but don't leave the island. But everything isn't what it seems. I was 100 pages in and I didn't even get to the synopsis. The only thing that happened, I read the first 100 pages, was that the main character went on a supply run. That was literally it. I didn't find the characters to be memorable. It was like 3 girls that were in a friend group. I can't even remember the 3 of their names. There was just nothing special about it. I just don't feel like I would have gotten anything from finishing it, so I just DNF'd it. The second book that I DNF'd was technically supposed to be a reread, so it's not a true DNF, but that was Truth Witch by Susan Dennard. I finished up her first trilogy earlier this year, the Something Strange and Deadly trilogy, which I have been loving, and I was saying, like, you know what? Susan Dennard is probably slept on. I remember reading Truth Witch and really enjoying it. I started reading this and I was just like, or what? I don't know what it was, but I just was not enjoying this the second time around. So I just said, never mind, I'm gonna go read something else. Is there anybody who is currently reading the Truth Witch series? How is it progressing? Just like let me know in the comments if it's worth my time. First book I want to talk about is The Jewel Thief. I ended up giving this book 2 stars. I got an e-arc of this via NetGalley thing. This book sounded so interesting to me. It followed a jewel thief, hence the name, who is accused of stealing the Hope Diamond. This takes place during the French Revolution. The story starts out where the girl has been accused and she has to tell the story of what happened to the diamond, or she's going to be sentenced to death. The premise of this sounded really good for historical fiction. I thought it was going to be action-packed. I thought it was going to have a lot of intrigue, and I was really interested in the French Revolution time period. Y'all, we didn't really even get to see that much of France in the book. I don't feel like there was enough happening outside of the main character's perspective. It kind of fell flat for me. The main interesting thing that I did like about it was the jewel cutting. I liked hearing about her being like a princess to her father, who was this jewel crafter for the throne. 85% of the story just basically takes place inside this jewel workshop, so it's not really a lot happening. I don't feel like there was any atmosphere that got built, and the number one issue was the writing. It just felt very dated. Felt like the author was writing a YA historical fiction in 2002. It was really stale and it was so hard to get immersed into the story because of that. It's based on unique plot and premise is what I gave it the 2 stars, because I had originally rated it 3 stars, but then when I thought about it, I was just like, do I feel like I wasted my time reading this? Yes. Overall, I wouldn't recommend that one. So the next book that I rated this one 3 stars, and that is Dumplin by Julie Murphy. This is basically a standalone about this main character named Willa Dean, who lives in a small town in Texas. Willa Dean is a big girl, and her mom is this pageant queen who now runs the local pageant that everyone enters, and it's a huge deal in her town. And then this year she decides that she's going to enter the pageant, and it just brings up a lot of other things that she needs to deal with. She has an aunt that recently passed away, and this is kind of her dealing with that grief. I enjoyed this for the most part. The things that I really liked about it was that it took place in small town Texas. I really like books that are set in the South. And also Willa Dean's internal monologue. I really like her character voice. I found her to be funny. I laughed at a lot of the things that she said. And also a big part of this book is the fandom that her best friend, her mom, and then her aunt that passed away was a part of, which is they are huge Dolly Parton fans. And I love books that include fandom. The things that I didn't really enjoy about this book, some of it was really anticlimactic. It started off good and then the end kind of fell off. Now that it's been a couple months since I've read this, I've already forgotten some of the things. I would have liked it a little bit more if I was more attached to the other characters aside from Willa Dean, if I was more attached to the romance, but a solid 3-star read. So the next book I want to talk about, I rated this book 3.5 stars, and that was Pride by Ibby-Zaboy. This is the second book that I've read by Ibby-Zaboy. Pride is a Pride and Prejudice remix. This book follows a main character who grew up in the boroughs of Bushwick, or the borough of Bushwick, and it has a strong focus on family and gentrification. The guy that's supposed to be her love interest moves in with his family across the street. She has a lot of animosity towards him towards the beginning of the story, but of course y'all know how Pride and Prejudice works. So I really enjoyed a lot of aspects about this book. I like Ibby-Zaboy's writing in general. I love the main character, how strong-willed she was. This book was not just about the two main characters' love story. My favorite parts of the book was when the main character actually went to visit an HBCU. I'm obsessed with finding books that actually feature HBCUs. I just don't see that a lot in my contemporary, and I really want it. You get to see her visiting campus and imagining herself there, and I just thought that was such a special scene. Also, this book had a little bit of spoken word in it, which I was not expecting. The book is narrated by Elizabeth Acevedo. If you need a push to read it, then I would highly suggest listening to it on audio. Next up, I rated this book a 3.75 stars, and that is The Devil's Thief Last Magician. It's a historical fantasy that I've really freaking been enjoying. It follows this main character, Esther, who can time travel. You are trying to see her get these artifacts that affect the overall history of magic. The Devil's Thief, I don't think it was as good as The Last Magician. This one had a lot of new character introductions. You didn't really get to spend as much time focused on basically the plot of the book. Like, the book had a plot, but there were a lot of character introductions in here. I didn't mind the new characters. I really liked all the new characters and new elements that were added. However, while you were reading the story, it took down the pacing of the story. It takes place in St. Louis during this World Fair, which apparently was a huge deal that year, and I didn't know the history of that at all. I had heard of it, but I hadn't really heard the specifics of it. It was such an interesting setting, and this was also when St. Louis was first being built up. I just felt like there were some great story arcs building up, and I really can't wait to find out how the third book ends. This was 3.75 stars. This next book I talked about extensively in my mid-year book freakout tag. I gave this book 4 stars, and that was Xeni by Rebecca Witherspoon. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but the quick synopsis is it's a romance novel that follows this main character named Xeni, whose aunt has recently passed away, and she has to go and basically settle her aunt's estate. There are all of these crazy things that she has to do in order to receive the funds that her aunt has left her, and those involve this guy in the town that she has never met but that her aunt really wanted to hook her up with. It was just so unexpected. I love Xeni as a character. She's had way more depth than I was expecting. Xeni is really grappling with a lot of the things that she finds out once her aunt has passed away, and then not only that, her romantic interest has all of these like family drama and things that he has been trying to get away from his home country, and you get to see all of that come to a head too. The steamy scenes were on point, baby. But yes, I gave Xeni 4 stars. Next book I'm going to talk about, I gave this book 4 stars, and that is Ash Princess by Laura Sebastian. Y'all, it's a moth in here. Okay, I'm going to try not to get distracted by that because y'all, I can't stand bugs. It has like one of your typical premises but with a twist. It follows a princess who lives in a kingdom that has been taken over. So this used to be her family's kingdom. They were invaded and they basically killed off every single person in the royal family except for the main character. They decided to keep her as a symbol to keep the other people oppressed and make sure that they stayed in their place. Something happens right at the beginning of the story that really serves as a catalyst for the princess to finally be like, you know what, I'm not doing this anymore. He's really working from the inside. And I feel like this was such a good installment in this first series because I ate this up. I read this in like a day or two, and there's also some interesting things that happens with her and one of these other characters that I literally, when I got to those parts and I was reading, I was like, didn't see that coming. This has all of like those quintessential YA fantasy tropes, but it was still a good time. I just found this to be really enjoyable, and I heard that the trilogy gets better and better, so I definitely will be picking up Lady Smoke and Ember Queen. And I love the way that this ended. Oh, I thought it was such a good ending for book 2. I thought this was a very strong first installment in this trilogy, and I gave this one a 4 stars. This next book I gave a 4.5 out of 5 stars. This was a series conclusion, Dark Days Deceit by Alison Goodman. Honestly, I forgot. This is the third and final book in the Dark Days Club trilogy, which is a historical fantasy that follows this main character, Lady Helen, as she goes on her adventures as essentially a demon hunter in Victorian London. And oh my goodness, this was such a great finale. Every single scenario happened in the finale, but it all made sense, and I still am trying to figure out like how Alison Goodman wove everything together. I just loved everything about it. And I also was still surprised by some of the reveals that we got to see, because it was one of those situations where you sit there and ask yourself, how come I didn't see that coming? I should have seen it coming, but I didn't see it coming. So Alison Goodman did her job. The stakes as high as the author claimed the stakes were throughout the story. Yes, they were. I liked the action scenes. I liked how all the dots connected. There were just so many great things about this third book. I obviously can't say too much about it because it's the third book in the trilogy, but would I recommend this trilogy? Yes, I would. Last book that I read in the month of May, y'all may have already heard me talk about this once again in my mid-year book freakout tag, and that is Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. At this point, y'all already know Elizabeth. Clap When You Land follows these two sisters who do not know that each other exists. They both have the same dad. One lives in the United States, one lives in the Dominican Republic. When their dad takes a plane ride to the Dominican Republic to visit one of the sisters, the plane crashes and he's killed in the crash. So through them dealing with their grief and processing what's happened to their dad, and of course everything that comes after a parent passes away, they eventually find out that they are sisters. I don't even know what to even say to describe the way that Elizabeth Acevedo's books make me feel, but every time I read a book by her, it just lingers in my spirit. She just has such a gift at storytelling. She helps you to really get inside your character's mind, to empathize with them, to understand them, and to root for them. And those are all the things I look for in a contemporary story, because honestly, the plots of her books are not always the interesting parts. And what the story was based on, the real plane crash that I knew nothing about, and she was saying that how important it was to bring this story to life. If you have not read Clap When You Land, do yourself a favor and do it. It's written in verse. It's not going to take you that long to read. I just really loved it. And I ended up giving this one a 4.75 out of 5 stars. Those are all the books that I read in the month of May. On to June. Whoo, y'all, we almost there. I read a total of 5 books. 2 of them were physical books and 3 of them were audiobooks. 1 was an autobiography / memoir. 2 were contemporary. 1 was a romance and 1 was a fantasy. My average star rating for the month of June was a 4.4. Y'all, I read some good books in June. So the first book I gave a 3.5 out of 5 stars, and this is actually the first book in the series that I read where I was talking about Xeni, and that is Rafe by Rebecca Witherspoon. This follows the main character Sloane, who is this world-renowned surgeon who lives in California. She's divorced and she has 2 young twin daughters. She is looking for someone to come and be her live-in nanny because the live-in nanny that she had quit on her, and in comes Rafe. This is basically the story of them two getting together. I thought this one was fun. Since I love Xeni so much, I had so much higher expectations. I still like these two main characters a lot, but I did not like them as much as Xeni. That's why I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. So the next book that I read was You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson. I gave this one a 4 stars. This follows this main character who grows up in this town in Indiana where prom is like a huge thing. She's not interested in any of that. She's in her senior year. She's done all this work and is anticipating this scholarship to go to her dream school, and at the last minute the scholarship falls through. She basically decides that she is going to run for prom queen because the prom queen gets a scholarship. I like the main character's internal monologue. I thought that she was really snarky and funny, but in a very authentic way. She wasn't mean or anything like that. I liked the romance in this one as well. I loved the first date scene. Another thing I really liked, sickle cell comes up a lot because her brother has it and her mom passed away from it. So they're being raised by their grandparents, but it comes up a lot. And that is something that is huge in the Black community. I don't think I've ever read any story that touched on sickle cell. Just that type of representation that was in there felt really important to me, and I find that when we are the authors of our own stories, we can really add in those things that are very prevalent in the community and happening in the community. So it was really important for me to see that aspect added into the story. I give it a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book, y'all, I have been waiting to talk about this book, and on top of that, I haven't heard anybody on BookTube talking about this book at all. All the Things We Never Knew by Lyra Tamani. This book was so good. This was another one that came right on time. This is a young adult contemporary romance novel, which is not really even, I don't even think I would classify it as a romance because that's just the jumping off point. Book is pitched as love and basketball, but YA. I am more of a Love Jones girl, but when I heard that premise, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna pick this up. So it follows these two main characters. There is this guy that goes to this elite high school, and he is one of the top basketball players in the state or in the country, and she is also one of the top basketball players in her state. They end up coming across each other in a meet cute kind of way, and a romance ensues from there. That's the premise, but when I read the book, I got so much more. And I love the family dynamics of the main character. She had a parent that was an interior designer. Her dad was a lawyer. Her brother was like this sweet, lovable teddy bear. They were in high school together, so the representation, as got to see a Black male character be the fluffy and fun and sweet one, which you don't hardly ever get to see. You always have Black guys acting extra hard. Her brother was like a teddy bear, and I just like to see her mom's businesses, and you really got to see the family dynamic roles. The other main character, you got to really experience the strained relationship. His dad is raising him, his mom passed away, and how they work through that, and a lot of things that they really both face as characters, and everything is not as picture perfect as it seems. This book is more than meets the eye. I keep thinking about it. I read this towards the beginning of June. I think it came out on June 2nd. I thought it was such a gem. Her writing is so on point. This book reminds me of the perfect blend between a Nicola Yoon contemporary and an Elizabeth Acevedo contemporary. So there is this quick love story that happens, but then you get the depth of something that you would read like an Elizabeth Acevedo. If y'all have not picked up this book, pick it up. I'm 4.5 out of 5 stars. Next book I'm going to talk to y'all guys about is the very first book that I read in June and was an immediate 5-star. I talked about this book extensively in my mid-year book freakout tag because I was talking about how it was the best book that I read this year. There's another book that I read too, so I don't know if that's still true, but this was a 5 out of 5 stars for me, and I'm going to talk about it briefly because I talked about it so extensively in my other video, and that is More Than Enough by Elaine Welterworth, the youngest editor-in-chief in the history of the largest magazine publication in the world. Not only was she the youngest, but then she was the second Black person to ever be an editor-in-chief under this publication and the first one to do it in a beauty brand. She was the editor of Teen Vogue magazine, which was a huge deal. This story chronicles her life growing up in California, and it talks about so many things. It talks about ageism, it talks about the Black Lives Matter movement, it talks about her experiences and relationships on the back end, it talks about her experiences in the corporate world, microaggressions, it talks about it just talks about so much. And Elaine is a very likable character. Even as I hold this book up now, I think she's only like 33 now, so a lot of these experiences happened to her in her mid-20s and early 20s, and it just talks so much about her life. I found it to be fascinating. I found it to have a lot of depth. I was talking to one of my subscribers about this book, and they left a comment that was perfect because I had been disappointed in Girl Boss, and I was raving about this book, and they basically said that like this book was everything that Girl Boss wasn't. I got so much from this book. I just would highly recommend it to everybody. Now, for the crown jewel, the #1, y'all, A Song of Wraith and Ruin, Roseanne Brown. Believe the hype because 5 out of 5 stars. I just was not expecting to love this as much as I did. It basically took all of the fantasy things, the things that I love about fantasy, all the tropes that I like, and did them well and did them better. This book to me really represents like what it means when it's like you can do something that has been done before but then do it better and it bring new life to it. This book follows two main characters. It's a princess, and then it also follows Malik, who is an outcast. For reasons that you have to read the book to find, they are basically pit against each other in this fantasy world, and they are quite literally trying to kill one another. The reasons for them actually wanting to kill each other make sense to the storyline. Stakes are really high. The book also takes place during this big huge festival that only happens every 50 years called Solstasia, and they didn't even talk about that, I don't think, on the flap. And y'all, Solstasia being the backdrop for this novel was so freaking good. I love the entire festival theme. I love the competition element of it. I love that only one of the characters was in the competition and the other one was behind the scenes. I liked the folklore. I'm going to do a full review for this book. I've not done a full review on my channel in years, and I'm going to do a full review for this book. But if you have not picked this up and you're even a little bit interested in it, read it. 5 out of 5 stars. I cannot wait for the follow-up to this duology. Alright y'all, my camera's about to die and I'm running out of space. Talk to me in the comments. I always respond back in my comments, and I will see y'all next time. Bye!